There's the great story about James Cameron working on Aliens and Terminator, listening to different music when he went back and forth. What do you kind of do when you're shuttling between these really evocative fictional universes? How do you kind of get in the mindset for Star Wars versus for something like X-Men?
Well, I do. I create little soundtracks for myself to everything I'm working on. They're not necessarily like original Star Wars music. It's just the feeling of whatever that story is. And I'll use, contemporary music. I'll use classical music. So that helps me get my mind in it. The other part of it for me, because I get asked a fair amount, like sort of how I juggle them, and I juggled them as a kid. Like I read XMen comics, I saw Star Wars, 25 times in the movie theater every time one came out. So as a kid, I was like living in these different imaginary universes very coherently, maybe even more coherently than I do as a grown-up. And so the going back and forth for me, it's like if I were to say to you, how do you keep your family straight? How your parents are different than your spouse or your kids or whatever. That's my experience of X-Men and Star Wars, is they're like my relatives. So I have a very clear idea as to the way my mom would say something versus the way my kids would.
What is your playlist for the Star Wars spin-off movie that you're working on right now?
Interestingly, it's a fair amount of hip-hop. So, that won't be in the movie, and Star Wars is not traditionally a hip-hop universe, but
there are some corners of Mos Eisley that might actually...
That's true, and I actually saw this thing online, somebody sent me this week or last week. There was a mashup between Biggie Smalls' Life After Death and Star Wars music. It was called Life After the Death Star, and I actually found it really inspiring.